EPSCoR, the established program to stimulate competitive research, has helped states throughout the country advance their science and engineering capabilities by providing strategic opportunities for discovery, innovation, and knowledge-based prosperity. This is especially true in the state of Maine, where we have a long history of research-driven impacts. Here, cross-disciplinary initiatives driven by EPSCoR are building a globally competitive economy and a sustainable future for our state. Today, the program's innovative history endures through Maine EPSCoR's current Track 1 project, the Sustainable Ecological Aquaculture Network, or CNET. The aquaculture industry, which involves the farming of finfish, shellfish, and aquatic plants, has the potential to resolve many issues involving ecological sustainability, economics, and individual health in our state. Maine's 3,500 miles of serpentine coastline offer the perfect opportunity for statewide aquaculture expansion, and CNET hopes to facilitate this expansion through interdisciplinary research. CNET makes critical research investments and delivers scientific knowledge to key decision makers while improving STEM outreach, promoting diversity, and advocating collaborative efforts in research and development. Our project includes the University of Maine, 10 partner institutions, aquaculture farmers, citizen scientists, students of all ages, and stakeholders. Together, we're turning Maine's unique coastline into a living laboratory. While the Maine EPSCoR office and many CNET personnel are located at the University of Maine, we'd like to take you on a trip up the coast of Maine to see some of the research taking place at a handful of our partner institutions. We'll visit the University of New England, the Darling Marine Center, Hurricane Island, Maine Maritime Academy, and the Down East Institute. Later, we'll show you some of the workforce development and STEM outreach CNET has played a key part in advancing throughout the state. In this video, we'll hear from some of the leading scientists, students, and stakeholders involved with CNET. First up, John Lewis, the aquaculture program lead at the Department of Marine Resources, will give us a stakeholder's perspective on the information brought to light by the CNET researchers.
Department of Marine Resources is the state's marine resources agency. We're responsible for all fisheries in the state, all the harvest, for everything from lobster, which is the big one, to groundfish, to shrimp, to urchins, to clams, municipal shellfish, and then we also have an aquaculture program as well. We've got aquaculture running from Kittery to Eastport. Primarily in the western part of the state, it's oysters. Casco Bay has got some mussels and seaweed in it, and that continues up the coast until we get to the Mount Desert area where finfish takes over. And then down in the Machias and the Eastport area, it's primarily finfish aquaculture. CNET is contributing scientific knowledge. One of the things that people typically want out of any kind of a lease application is assurance as what's going to happen biologically, ecologically, socially. And CNET is able to provide some scientific information that can help that discussion.
In Bioregion 1, Adam St. Gelais and his team at the University of New England work with researchers and commercial partners to support Maine's burgeoning aquaculture industry. Based at the Center for Excellence in the Marine Sciences at the university's campus in Biddeford, Maine, the team's primary focus is on the Saco Bay region. But their work has impacts and implications that extend far beyond this beautiful bay.
I'm a research scientist for the Center for Excellence in the Marine Sciences, which is sort of the research wing of marine sciences at UNE. In addition, I'm also conducting my own CNET research that's largely focused right now on seaweed farming and the ecology around seaweed farming, as well as some work on mussel farms. The practical research that we're working on right now with seaweeds is really tied to where they grow and how they can impact the environment where they're being grown and how the environment impacts them. The idea is through looking at different isotopes of nitrogen, which you would find in the water, you can then tell the proportion of nutrients within the kelp that came from anthropogenic or land-based sources versus oceanic sources. At the same time, we're looking at the food safety aspects of where you grow that kelp. Many areas that have nitrogen impacts also have impacts associated with excess nitrogen, like bacterial problems. So these areas, for example, are usually closed to shellfish harvesting, but no one really knows where you can and can't grow seaweed for those same health safety purposes. So we're diving into that and looking at how the water quality from a bacterial standpoint impacts the quality of the product and the kelp that you're growing. That's something that we're working on this summer and that we hope to continue through the next couple growing seasons using some undergraduate and graduate student work. The University of New England dedicated a space within our Marine Science Center that would become a macroalgae nursery and research center. It was formerly a laundry room that wasn't really being utilized, so we gutted that and built out that facility. So over the past couple years, we've been able to provide seed to 5 different farmers that would not have been able to start farming without having that resource available to them. In addition, now they've become our partners and friends, and we're able to continue our applied research on their farms. Through CNET, we've been able to acquire some follow-on funding to expand the capacity of that facility. So we'll be working on that this fall, and we'll hopefully be at least quadrupling the capacity of our nursery component of the seaweed facility. So we'll be able to help more farmers. All of the CNET work, largely, that's been happening at UNE has been very collaborative in nature. So there's a lot of overlap between projects. The work that I'm doing feeds in really nicely to Dr. Byron's work with food webs, because she uses the same tools to assess food webs that we use to assess where the nitrogen is coming from. So we're creating data sets that can be used in multiple facets, which is going to be really valuable.
I'm currently working on several projects. They are all under the same umbrella and topic of trying to understand how the environment influences the production of ocean foods. Within that, I have more of a focus on bivalve shellfish species and on kelp species, primarily because that's what we have in abundance here in Maine. Well, we know that shellfish eat live phytoplankton, and we know they're capable of eating detritus, that dead, decaying organic matter. But we don't have a good sense of how detritus contributes specifically to growth or to quality of tissue. So, for example, we're told that eating shellfish is good for us because it provides us with essential fatty acids in our diet, right? These are fatty acids that we're not able to make ourselves. We have to eat them through consuming other animals that produce them. And if we find out that certain diet for shellfish produces increased growth rates or different quality of tissues, and that really opens up an opportunity for niche marketization of product, or helping farmers understand where and when is the best place to grow their product. Well, CNET has not only provided the financial infrastructure to be able to do the work, but they've also provided the resources to be able to expand our network in the field of aquaculture and ocean food science. And so right now, with the support of CNET, with the funding and the resources of CNET, I'm able to maintain a very active lab full of students, high school, undergraduate, and graduate students. I am collaborating with partners across the state, and this work is gaining international attention, and so it's helping me leverage additional projects on an international scale.
Next, we'll head north to Damariscotta, where Dr. Damian Brady leads CNET research at the Darling Marine Center. The DMC, a proud part of the University of Maine, brings unique strengths and opportunities to UMaine by virtue of its waterfront facilities, resident scientists, and surrounding community. The center's vibrancy is made up of students, faculty, and staff, united in their efforts to share world-class expertise in marine sciences, engineering, and the changing environment.
I am Damian Brady. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Marine Sciences, and I'm a professor here at the Darling Marine Center, and I'm also the assistant director for Maine Sea Grant for research. So the Darling Marine Center is the University of Maine's marine campus, and so we have a three-part mission that's research, education and teaching, and outreach. And so what we try to do is essentially bring Maine's coast to the people of Maine. And so the idea here is that we can use information from a buoy network measuring lots of water quality parameters, information from remote sensing products, so actual satellite images of the coast of Maine, information from models, so hydrodynamic models, how water moves inside these estuaries, and then models of how these organisms grow. So whether it be oysters or mussels or scallops or salmon or the rich amount of aquaculture species that we have in the coast of Maine, can we use the information that we get on the water quality, the temperature, the salinity of the water to figure out where the best place to site these organisms are. So the idea here is multiple tools engaged in linking the right species with the right environment. Damascata grows about 80% to maybe even higher of all the oysters in Maine come from this one system. So a lot of what we've attempted to do is say, what is it about this system that's so productive? And then we take that search image and we apply it to the rest of the coast. And so there are many new areas along the coast of Maine that we think would be fantastic for aquaculture. And so we are working with those places, for instance, in places like the Madomic River, in places like the New Meadows River in Casco Bay, that have brand new leases on them that we think can be at least as productive as the Damascata.
So my name is Cheyenne Adams. My research involves looking at oyster farms and assessing the potential role of detritus in oyster diets. From my perspective, a food web is how both nutrients and energy move throughout an ecosystem. And so it starts with the primary producers and then it moves up, but then it also loops back around as nutrients back to the primary producers like algae. And that step of looping back around to the beginning, that's when things are dying and decomposing, and we call them detritus. And so bivalves play a really interesting role in the entire food web because they can eat both fresh live phytoplankton, and we also think that to a certain extent they're eating some types of detritus. And so we measure EHAs, or digestible protein, in the water because that can tell us how much detritus is there. If there's more digestible protein than there is phytoplankton, then that might be detrital. And then we can compare that to the growth in our growth models to see whether the animals are growing faster or slower, when there's more or less detritus, what type of detritus it is, how good it is as food when it's detrital. So from our 2016 field data results, we were able to compare the water quality and the food conditions with oyster growth and develop a sort of model and identify the factors that best predict oyster growth. The factor that seems to be limiting growth the most was temperature, which is really interesting because in 2016 in the Damascata, there was lots of phytoplankton, there was lots of detritus, there was lots of other stuff. So they weren't food limited, and so because of that, they pretty much grew as quickly as the temperatures would allow.
My name is Libby Gorse, and I'm a PhD student in the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department working on the CNET grant. My current research project is looking at the effect of the oyster farms here in the Damascata on the sediment-water interface. In particular, I'm looking at how nutrients are being regenerated by the sediment and the microbes in the sediment. I'm using these flux chambers to mimic the sediment-water interface in the lab as best as I can. So I go out into the field and we collect sediment cores, and then we bring them back, we incubate them for about 12 to 18 hours, and then we cap them and we draw water off the top. And over the course of 5 to 8 hours, I draw water off just to see how the sediments are metabolizing. CNET has really opened my eyes to what interdisciplinary really can be. That's kind of like what the whole foundation of CNET is all about, is getting people to work together, both within CNET and outside of CNET, really growing the network of people working on this project.
With collaboration and interdisciplinary work as a key driver, Hurricane Island stands out as a unique partner in CNET research. Located off the coast of Rockland in Mid-Coast, Maine, the organization works to help students and scientists participate in authentic, hands-on field science and collaborative leadership programs and experiences.
I'm Caitlin Cleaver. I'm a PhD student working with Dr. Teresa Johnson. I have been working with CNET since June of 2015, so just over 2 years. So at Hurricane Island Center for Science and Leadership, I'm the Director of Science and Research, and in my role, I head up our research program. And so the kind of research we like to do here at Hurricane is answer high priority questions for local communities. And obviously, the communities surrounding an island are pretty dependent on marine resources. The Aquaculture and Shared Waters program is a collaborative project between Maine Sea Grant, the Maine Aquaculture Innovation Center, the Maine Aquaculture Association, and basically the class targets commercial fishermen who are interested in learning more about shellfish and seaweed aquaculture. And the class meets from January through April or May, and they meet weekly. They cover all aspects of aquaculture, so business planning, marketing, shellfish biology, shellfish husbandry, same with seaweed, and they take field trips. And so it's really like immersing individuals in what it takes to do aquaculture and do it successfully. So we've been doing a longitudinal study of these individuals to follow and track their progress in implementing aquaculture, what barriers they come up against, and also what their motivation is for adopting aquaculture. Often research happens in a vacuum and isolated within our disciplines and in our own fields, and so the social ecological system forces us outside of those disciplines and brings us together to think how our research can integrate and apply to the real world. And so in my work specifically, I'm focusing on the farmers, and I'm focusing on individuals who are interested in getting into aquaculture and learning more about who those people are and what their challenges are, and then how we might be able to resolve them from a governance perspective, or from support from other nonprofit organizations, and how to make tailor training to make it more effective for those individuals to be successful with aquaculture. So Molly Miller also works with Dr. Teresa Johnson. So Molly and I spent a lot of time together coding interviews and talking about major themes that were coming out of those interviews, and both of us relied pretty heavily on that information to guide the next steps of our research questions.
I am a graduate research assistant working on my PhD. I just finished my second year. Broadly, my research looks at how the governance system is shaping the growth and development of aquaculture in Maine. And I'm doing it in 3 different ways. I'm first looking at intertidal aquaculture, so particularly soft-shell clam aquaculture, and how that can be further developed in Maine. It's pretty new. It started kind of in 2012, was the first farm in Georgetown. And so I'm looking at what the barriers and challenges are for growing soft-shell clam aquaculture, but also where the opportunities might be in expanding that in the future. And then I'm also looking at the lease hearing process, because that is the primary avenue for public opinion in aquaculture decision making. CNET is leveraging the SES by really using it as this guide for all of us to organize around a common language. We talk about things as resource systems and resource units, and we're all on the same page that way. And even though we come from all different disciplines, we are now looking at the natural system and the human system together and solving a common problem. In terms of multidisciplinary research, I think something like a social ecological systems framework is actually really perfect for a large grant like we are, because you already have so many disciplines that are trying to solve this problem. And with the framework, it's a built-in conceptual structure basically for all of us to be working on, but it can be brought back into this broader picture of what will this mean in the real world as an applied solution, for instance.
CNET's real-world application is also evident in Castine, Maine, where researchers at Maine Maritime Academy are working to build capacity and support ongoing data collection efforts in Bioregion 2. There, Dr. Jim McKenna and his team are conducting an intensive research program along the Bagaduce River estuary.
My name is Jim McKenna. I'm professor of marine biology here at MMA and the department chair for the Ocean Studies Department. I personally got involved with CNET primarily through connections I had with Maine Sea Grant, but very early on realized that this is a really large scope project and would provide a lot of opportunities for the department and for the college. We've now become the host for the buoy system that's out in the river now here on the Bagaduce River, and so we're serving as the local support team and local expertise to gather data. In addition to me, we've had a number of undergraduate students that have worked on this project. Last summer we had 4 students, this summer we have 2, plus a former student who's graduated and is planning on going to graduate school working on the project. You know, what's great about our program here is it's very hands-on, and this project completely feeds off of that. So I've got my undergraduate students, they're not only doing the science work, but they're driving the boats. So it's been a great opportunity to really get the students some extremely valuable experience, and I'm really thankful for the project for that.
Best part of hands-on research experience is exactly that. It's hands-on, it's having to deal with problems as they arise, it's kind of living in the moment and thinking and problem solving and getting to be out in just such an amazing environment. It really helps to expand upon what we're doing. We work with a lot of this equipment in a very small, kind of like a taste of it during the school year, and so to take that and then to have to remember it and apply it, and it's not just the equipment, some of it's programming for the CTD that, you know, we once had to do as freshmen, now getting back out here and having to apply it and learn newer and bigger skills has been a really meaningful experience, and I think it will help in the future, especially with like the building of confidence.
The key things that we're trying to gather data are some of the fundamental physical drivers of the systems. We've got both the buoy system that is obviously fixed stations that are giving us hourly readings on a variety of those parameters. And then in addition to that, we're conducting bi-weekly transect surveys of the system. We've got 7 stations from the mouth of the estuary up to the head of the estuary. We go out there every other week and sample for a variety of things. We do some CTD casts to get profiles of salinity and temperature in the system so we can understand water column structure. We're collecting Secchi disk depth to evaluate light availability, turbidity so we can understand suspended particles that are in the water column, filtering for chlorophyll so we can get a sense of primary productivity. So we've got those as our baseline set of data for the transect studies. In the Bagaduce itself, there's been a lot of heated discussion between the community and some of the state agencies that are responsible for permitting for aquaculture within the Bagaduce system. There's been real interest in expanding the existing aquaculture to larger parts of the system, and there's been a lot of community resistance against that. And part of that resistance comes, rightfully so, from a concern that we really don't understand the science of this system well enough to be able to predict what's going to happen to the system if we do start issuing these permits. And so there's a real desire among the community to improve our science-based decision-making here. And in order to do that, we need to feed that science into the decision-making process. So having seen that down here and building the capacity within MMA to be able to deliver this kind of data to the state and to the community, you know, I think is going to be a really critical and important thing that we can produce for this region. So there's a lot of other benefits that we're getting out of it in terms of student experience and the education that they get, the practical experience they get. But in terms of why now, I think the critical thing is that that issue that this is something that we need science data to make better, more informed decisions for this area.
Scientific data and information is being similarly leveraged in Beals, Maine, at the Downeast Institute for Applied Marine Research and Education. In this beautiful and remote location, Dr. Brian Beal and his team are conducting research initiatives and applied field investigations that will directly impact the economic sustainability of coastal communities throughout Maine.
My name is Brian Beal, and we're on Great Wass Island in the town of Beals. The Downeast Institute is the University of Maine at Machias Marine Field Station. DEI's role in the ocean or marine economy is one of innovation and risk-taking. The mission of the Down East Institute is to improve the quality of life for the people of Down East and coastal Maine through applied marine research, through technology transfer, and through public marine resource education. And so the things that we're working on right now that, again, no one really has focused on, we're looking at creating a fishery here in Washington County for European oysters. People want to grow oysters in Washington County, and the problem is they can't grow the American oyster because the waters are so cold. It takes 20 years for them to get to be a commercial size down here. But European oysters do very well in cold water, so we're looking at that. We're studying the Arctic surf clam, which is a species that grows subtidally, and we've learned that we can grow it intertidally, which means we have the ability to transfer the technology that we learned to clammers who could farm it or grow it themselves. The same with razor clams, and the list goes on. We're working with everything from lobsters and razor clams to Arctic surf clams and blue mussels. And in all of this, we're the ones that are taking the risk in terms of trying to find out whether or not it's feasible to even think about putting this out to the working waterfront. The further east you go in Maine, relatively speaking, the more important the ocean environment becomes for the economy. If you look at ports like Jonesport or Freeport, and you look at the working waterfront, in Jonesport you won't see a mast. Everything is a lobster boat or a fishing vessel. The ocean to the local economy here in Down East Maine is absolutely critical. What is happening here today is a Coastal Science Academy for local K through 12 teachers. So this is the last day that the teachers have been here. They've been here since Monday. Today is Thursday. And we have taken them through a series of demonstrations of hands-on, field-based projects that they can do with their classes. And we've demonstrated things on mudflats and here on the Rocky Shore. And the goal is to get them to incorporate some of the things that we've demonstrated into their classes and ask us for help during the course of the school year to come with them and assist them with their classes. CNET is essential to what we're doing. The funding that's been provided and the collaboration that ensues because of that shared funding has been vital. The CNET project, or the CNET program, is one that is helping to enhance the vision of aquaculture in Maine. And 30 years from now, we're going to look back, and this is going to be a pivotal time for aquaculture in the state of Maine. Aquaculture will play a prime role in the coastal economy of Maine in the future, and CNET's right there.
CNET is right there in terms of education and outreach as well. Working with educational organizations and nonprofits throughout the state, CNET is creating opportunities for students in diverse communities to ensure that Maine has an energized STEM workforce. The Summer of Science program, developed in partnership with Maine EPSCoR, leverages research to introduce thousands of students to aquaculture through innovative curriculum and toolkits.
The University of Maine Toolkits and Summer of Science is helping to connect research to kids through a number of ways. Specifically with the toolkits, we're spending a lot of time talking with researchers and finding out what they're discovering in their research and taking their discoveries or current findings and making them developmentally appropriate and designing hands-on experiential learning activities for young people. These types of activities help young people discover STEM career pathways simply by exposing them to something new and different. Particularly in elementary grades, these young people are natural scientists. They're inquisitive, they're curious, they wonder, and they're trying to figure out where their pathway might actually be, what their interests are. So if we can capture them at that young age and expose them to something that they potentially could be interested in, they're much more likely to follow that pathway up through middle high school and into college and the workforce. So young people have had transformational experiences through this program in a few different examples. One example that comes to mind is our Summer of Science teen teachers, where the teenagers themselves are really becoming involved and connected to the actual research and having to explain it in a way to their younger peers. So they're connected at such a rich level that it's impacting their own deep understanding of science and the research, and in many cases actually dictating or informing where they might want to go next in their future. So we've had a number of teens who have expressed interest in pursuing further education in education and or science and engineering fields as a result of being part of this project. Specifically connected to aquaculture, it's very common for young people that we're working with to leave a session saying, I love seaweed. I didn't know that I liked seaweed before. I learned something new. I'm going to go home and tell mom and dad about that.
Research has also shown that one key component to persistence in sciences for Native American students is the melding of the science and culture into STEM curriculum. The rich cultural heritage of the Wabanaki tribes and their environment lends itself well to the melding of the two. The WAYS program is a long-term opportunity to engage Wabanaki students through both promoting ongoing participation in the sciences and encouraging the possibility of a STEM career pathway in their tribal communities.
So WAYS is the Wabanaki Youth Science Program, and it includes tribal youth from across the state, from the 5 tribal communities. There's the Penobscot, the 2 Passamaquoddy communities, the Micmacs, and the Maliseets. And we've had participation from all those communities in our program over the last 6 or 7 years. A lot of what we do in WAYS is to expose our youth to science in a way that is culturally relevant. If you don't do that, it is just merely something that exists in a lab. But for us to see the light in the eye of a young person say, oh, looking at fish or looking at water isn't just some lab experiment. That actually is about us and our health or our community or our resources. It's invaluable. One thing in WAYS that we're really excited about for the future is we've really concentrated on middle and high school students, done a little bit with elementary students as well, but we're really pushing in the next 5 years to extend the pipeline, right, from middle to high school into college, university, and beyond, and to provide the supports that we are providing in these earlier educational stages at university level. We've been pretty floored by the success of the WAYS program. I think that this is making the whole system of science education better, especially for future generations, and we're seeing the success and the payoff for Native students in particular.
Being a part of the WAYS program has really kind of opened my eyes to the whole field of science that there is. Like, before I was a part of that, I had some ideas, but then getting involved in that kind of really pushed me and kind of showed that there was a need for it. And I actually got an internship at the University of Maine and really liked it there, and so I applied. I definitely think that hands-on research is so important because it gives you a chance to go out there and actually experience it and fall in love with it. And if WAYS wasn't a thing, some kids wouldn't have that opportunity.
My name's Sarah Fields and I'm 17 and I'm going to be a senior at John Babs. The WAYS program definitely gives the youth a lot of opportunities, and it's a really good program. Well, last summer I took my own pictures of the hydroacoustic survey, and then I put them together along with subtitles on a poster, and just to describe to people in a simpler way of what the hydroacoustic survey is about. Basically a sonar system that picks up fish, the air bladder in fish, so we can get a relative amount of fish in the Penobscot estuary. And our survey ranges from Bangor to Stockton Springs. And we're in the midst of making a kiosk so that people can know more about the hydroacoustic surveys.
From the most southern to the most northern points of the state and beyond, CNET research has implications for the working waterfront that has dominated our coastal way of life for centuries. Now, more than ever, scientific information and innovation are needed to protect these resources. With the National Science Foundation's investment in CNET and the hard work of those involved, we are taking vital steps towards understanding the linkages between marine science, community perception, research, and the economy. This information will provide communities with critical tools to develop plans for future growth in Maine and beyond.